Hey everybody, let's keep going on our lessons learning how to round decimals. Now, I know a lot of times when kids are doing assignments, they tend to skip all of the stuff that's up at the top of the page. This is information that might help you understand the directions a little bit better. So let's take a look at what we have here. This tells us that you can use the number line below to help you round 8 and 237 thousandths to the nearest whole number. All right, boys and girls, it's always a good idea to take these numbers when we're first learning about decimal amounts, put them into mixed number form, 8 and 237 thousandths. That kind of just helps you get a picture in your mind of what you're talking about here. Think of it as being like, let's see, 8 pieces of pizza and then 1 piece of pizza that's been cut into teeny tiny little pieces. It's been cut into 1,000 equal pieces. And there's 237 of those tiny little itty bitty bits left in the pizza. So they want to know, is 8 and 237 thousandths closer to 8 or 9? And here on the number line, you can see they've marked the two whole numbers, 8 and 9. The halfway point in between those two is 8 and 5/10. And of course, we know 8 and 5/10 is the same as 8 1/2. And then they marked the location of 8 and 237 thousandths on the number line. Notice that when you're rounding to the nearest whole number, you use the digit in the tenths place to determine whether you're going to round up or down. Since this digit is a 2, remember our little rhyme, 4 or less, let it rest. So since this digit is less than 2, we're going to round down to 8. In the second example, we're going to round 7 and 762 thousandths. We're going to round that number to the nearest tenth. So here on our number line, we have 7 and 7/10 marked and 7 and 8/10 marked. Our halfway point in between 7 and 7/10 and 7 and 8/10 is 7 and 75 hundredths. Notice how the halfway point, the last digit of the halfway point is always a 5. And here we have marked 7 and 762 thousandths. That location is here. When we're rounding to the nearest tenths place, we need to use the digit in the hundredths place to help us decide if we're going to round up or down. So the digit in the hundredths place is 5 or more, so we're going to go up a floor. We're going to round up to 7 and 8/10. So I think one thing that it's important to focus on, and I want you to write this down in your notebook and keep it handy, when you're rounding, whatever place you're rounding to, it's the digit 1 to the right that's going to help you determine whether you round up or down. So if you're rounding to the nearest whole number, whoops, not whole number, goodness. Oh goodness. If you're rounding to the nearest whole number, let's say you're looking at 1 and 5/10. Here's my whole number. And I'm going to use the digit in the tenths place to help me decide if I'm going to round up or down, because that's 1 place to the right of my ones place. If I'm going to round to the nearest tenths place, like let's say I had this number, and I wanted to round to the nearest tenths place, I'm going to use the digit immediately to the right of the tenths place to help me decide whether I need to round up or down. Which digit is that? That's going to be my hundredths digit. Okay. If you are going to round to the nearest hundredths place, like for example, if you had 1.1 and 251 thousandths, here's your hundredths place. Which digit will you use to help you determine if you're going to round up or down? You're going to need your thousandths place to help you do that. So you guys copy this down and keep it handy so you can glance at it while you're doing your work. Okay guys, here we go practicing rounding these numbers to the place indicated by the underlined digit. So I always think it's helpful if you can add some color to your work or your notes. It kind of helps your brain to notice important information. So I'm going to highlight the underlined digit just to help me focus on what I'm rounding, what place I'm rounding to. So for this first number, I have 4,725 and 806 thousandths. Remember that whatever your last digit is, in this case, my last digit is a 6, that's the place value word that you read for your decimals. Now I'm going to round this to the hundreds place, which means that all of these digits following the hundreds place are going to revert to zeros. So my tens, my ones, my tenths, my hundredths, and my thousandths will all revert to zeros. Now I need to figure out if I'm going to round my 7 up or down. So let me make this a little smaller so I have some space. Let me make a number line. Okay, so I have 4,700. I could either round down to that amount, so this digit would stay the same, or if I round up, my 7 would increase by 1, meaning I would be rounding to 4,800. My midpoint in between 4,700 and 4,800 is 4,750. There's always a 5 involved in your midpoint. Always, always, always. So now I need to mark 4,725 and 806 thousandths on my number line. And that is going to be pretty much, I would say about here. Like if, yeah. Well, actually, I'd probably put it right in the middle in between those two locations. Since it's 4,725, and I know 25 is in between 700 and 750. Okay, so 4,725 and 806 thousandths. So going back to our rule about which digit to use when we're rounding, I can see on my number line that I'm going to be rounding down because I can see that this location is closer to 4,700. But I also want to just remind you that the quick, easy way to round, look at the place you're rounding to, look at the digit immediately to the right. If it's 4 or less, let it rest, meaning you round down to 4,700. And you can put the decimal point and a 0 there if you want to. You can put 2 or 3 zeros there if you want to. It doesn't change the value of the number. As long as the zeros are coming after the decimal point, it does not change the value of the number to add zeros. Okay, let's look at number 2. 7 and 49 thousandths. So in mixed number form, that would look like this. 7 and 49 thousandths. And we're going to round that to the nearest one whole. Okay, so our 7 is either going to round up or down, and then those digits following the 7, those will revert to zeros. If I round it down, it will stay 7. If I round it up, it will round up to 8. The midpoint in between those two locations is 7 and 5/10, which is the same as 7.5. And 7 and 49 thousandths, I would put that super duper close. I would put that like right there. So that's definitely going to round down to 7. So if I'm rounding to my nearest whole number, I can look at the digit immediately to the right, which is my tenths place, and it's a 0. 4 or less, let it rest. So yes, I am going to be rounding down to 7. Okay, for number 3, we have a pretty big number here. Looks like going to be in the 100 millions place. Let's try. Let's see. 165,023,912 and 5/10. And we're rounding to the 100 millions place. Let's try to do it without the number line this time. We're rounding to the 100 millions place, so we'll use the 10 millions place to help us determine whether we're rounding up or down. So since our digit is 5 or more, we're going to go up a floor, so we'll be rounding up. Our 1 will round up to a 2. Then all of the digits following that 2 will revert to zeros. So we're going to round up to 200 million. And remember, if you want to put the decimal point in the 0, you can. If you leave it off, it will not change the value of your number. Okay, one more to do. Stay with me, guys. All right, for number 4, oh dear, I've written on my sheet here and I can't quite see it. Ah, what on earth is happening? Okay, sorry about that. So this is supposed to be 200 million. All right, now here I have 18 and 692 thousandths. So I'm going to put it in my place value chart, 18 and 692 thousandths, and I'm rounding that to the nearest tenths place, which means I'm going to use this digit to help me do that. 5 or more go up a floor, so will I be rounding up or down, do you think? This is 5 or more, so my 6 will round up to a 7. 18 and 7/10. My hundredths place and my thousandths place will revert to zeros, and I can either include them or not in my number. It does not change the value of the number. If it's after the decimal point, you can add as many zeros as you want here, and it does not change the value of the number. Okay, now for these next ones, I'm going to let you figure them out, but I am going to just highlight some important words and help draw your attention to them. Number 5 says round the number of connected computers in year 2 to the nearest 10 million. So here we have year 2, and we need to find the 10 millions place. So when I look at the number of computers connected to the internet, in year 2, let's see, I've got 42,199,279, and I need to round that to the nearest 10 millions place, which is here. So that means I'm going to use my millions place to help me round. I'm going to let you do that on your own. Number 6, Mark earned $9.37 per hour working at the library. That's actually a pretty good wage for a library. Round his wage to the nearest 10 cents. Okay, so which digit represents 10 cents or a dime when we're talking about money? It's the tenths digit. So if we're going to round, let me come down here, $9.37 to the nearest 10 cents, that means I'm rounding it to the tenths place, and so I'll use my hundredths place to help me round. You guys do those on your own.